Sorry about that. Now, this is the definition of health, sovereign health. Is about the ability to make our fundamental decisions and choices. And it's also it is inalienable, meaning that we don't owe it from anyone. It basically is our right and we don't need to beg for it. If we could go to the next slide. I'm sorry about that. He'll have to move the slides for me. We could. Now, two areas that we must be very careful when we are negotiating these international instruments is that some of them will contain things that are not relevant to our cultures. They'll have values that are deceptive and values that are inconsistent with what we believe. And in the deception usually is euphemism. They use terms that don't mean what they say to hide the truth. And then the other one is infiltration. Because the question is, when you send negotiators to Geneva or wherever it is the negotiations are going, who is that who goes to negotiate for your country? Who has sent them? And what is their reference documents? How are they chosen? Are they from government, from civil societies? And if from civil societies, who funds the civil societies that actually take them there? Next, please. Now, that's a definition of health by WHO. Is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. And I would like us to reflect on it based on this diagram. That is what we are taught in science as a life cycle. It always starts with an adult female that lays some kind of egg that then becomes a young one and then matures into an adult. It always starts with an adult female. But we are farmers and we have kept chicken, and we know that chicken can actually lay eggs, and those eggs will not hatch unless there is been mating. Does that make sense? So what is wrong with this diagram? If we could go to the next one. Next. The male is missing. You have been lied to all your life. You have been told you're being taught science and you have been deceived. The male was removed from the life cycle. Next slide. This is a diagram from a Times magazine. Those two children are twins. The mother carried the pregnancy of the twins and gave birth. The mother is what you would call white today, and the father is black. They gave birth to those two twins. Same genetic material, different skin color, and the world would treat them differently. To use skin color to divide people is a scientific lie, and I'll let you think about that. We are all the same species. Now, what we learned from that life cycle is the reason the man was removed is because if you have both the male and the female, then you must believe that they both came together fully grown adults and ready to mate. And if they were there as fully grown adults, the question is, where did they come from? The question of the Almighty God of all creation then comes in. So removing the male allows you to live in the deception of creation. So there is an Almighty God of all creation, and that is what is the foundational truth about Ubuntu. We need to bring back the man in the life cycle and teach the correct science. And therefore, the term reproductive health should be removed from our language. It should be confined to the use of animals. It is animals that we reproduce, not human beings. What we need to use instead is to focus on the family. And it would be wonderful if all African countries had a ministry of family welfare. Next slide. This is what the life cycle should look like. So in the beginning, there was God, and God created everything that we see and that we don't see. And then God created male and female. He created the male, he created the female. And the institution of marriage is a spiritual institution. It is not a man-made institution. And in that marriage, then we're given the capacity to procreate, to get children. And that baby is not a part of the mother. It has to be born. And that child then must be looked after in what we call the family unit. And that family unit is what makes the society. It is from the rest of the society that we then get the next couple that then continues the life cycle. And because we are spiritual beings, there will be death in that community. And some souls will find their way back to the Father, and some may not find their way back to the Father, depending on how we look after the spiritual well-being of that community. This is what should be taught in our schools as the human life cycle. Now, the correct sex education, I've had people ask, there is a man and a woman, they come together in a relationship called marriage, which is a spiritual institution. And if they're blessed, they would get a child who is a boy is called a son. And if they are a girl, they're called a daughter. And then the man becomes a father and the woman becomes a mother. Those are titles. So that unit is what is then called the family. It is the many families that form the government. It is not the government that should tell families what to do. It is families that should tell the government what to do. That unit called the family, that is how sex education should be taught. When you say husband, when you say wife, those are sexual titles. When you say son and daughter, those are sexual titles. Sex education is not teaching children how to have sex. Sex education is to teach children how family is organized into government. Sorry, just one slide back. That should then be the correct definition of health. It should be the complete spiritual, physical, mental, and family well-being, and not the absence of disease or infirmity. So spiritual is missing from the WHO definition because it is godless. And family has been called society, which is amorphous and a big, large unit. We need to narrow that down to family. Now, on the LGBTQ agenda, just a few comments. Next slide. Is same-sex marriage possible? And I'd like to make sure, as we live here, we're very clear. Now, among our people, marriage is a spiritual union, and it is consummated through the first sexual intercourse among the couple. So any one of you here, look at your culture, look at your religion. Once the spiritual bringing together of the two has been completed, then sexual intercourse must happen and is celebrated, because that is how the marriage is eventually consummated. Now, people of the same sex cannot engage in sexual intercourse, so their marriage is already null and void. Okay? Is already null and void. So people of the same sex cannot be married, and that they can call their union whatever they want to call it. But they should not abuse the term marriage. Let's go to the next slide. When it comes to homosexuality and transgenderism, again, it is something that we need to be very careful about. When you look at young people, I had a young man who is having challenges with same-sex attraction. He had been abused by his father as a young man. There are young ladies who want to be boys because they were abused, and they thought that if they were boys, they would not be abused. And therefore, they want to become boys to save themselves from the pain of what they went through. So when we have same-sex attraction, or children who are rejecting their biological sex, it is very important for us to know that they are survivors of a very traumatic experience.
Vous allez chuter, docteur? Il faut chuter. Vous allez chuter? Non, il peut continuer. D'accord. Nous avons encore.
So the children who are experiencing those attractions
Ok, d'accord. Vous avez encore 10 minutes.
are survivors of adverse childhood experiences, and it is an expression of a very serious mental health illness called post-traumatic stress disorders. And if you understand that, then you understand that these children need our love. They need our understanding. They need us to bring them to a place of understanding of where the trouble started from, so that we can bring them to a point of healing. And it is extremely, extremely cruel to tell these children that they are normal and that they should actually live out their experience. And those are the kind of people we must deal with very severely. Anybody who teaches our children's sexual reproductive health and rights or comprehensive sexuality education should go to jail. Next slide. Next slide. And I would like to congratulate this august House on the fact that you passed your bill on the human sexuality rights and family values. People are calling it anti-homosexuality bill. They need to read and see that the title is different. The other thing that is important is, if there is a challenge, I would be happy to work with this House. I'd be happy to work with the Honorable, His Excellency, John Mahama, to tidy up the bill so that it is not thrown out. It is very important that that bill sees the day of light. The question of safe and unsafe abortion, if you're a medical worker, you know that we are being told there is safe abortion killing mothers and we should replace it with safe abortion. Both of them aim to kill the child deliberately. Both of them are medically unethical, and none of them is acceptable. So one is done by people who are not trained or in a place that is bad. The other one is done by people who are trained in a good place. Both of them aim to kill the baby 100% of the time. So next slide. Next. Again. So this is a statement I'd like to make in this august House. There is no medical diagnosis. There is no medical diagnosis for which the treatment that would be prescribed would be the deliberate killing of a preborn child. And I would like to challenge any medical person who is here and who may be listening from whatever part of the world to challenge that statement. Let's go on. Now, as I'm coming to an end, the question is, are we going through a pandemic, or are we going through genocide and racketeering to steal taxpayers' money? Next slide. We have what is called gain-of-function research, which some witches and wizards are actually taking natural appearing viruses and training them to become infective to human beings. And then they patent that virus. And then the virus is used to manufacture a vaccine. And then, surprisingly, there is an outbreak of a disease. And all our governments then must release taxpayers' money that was not meant for that work to run around going to take care of the pandemic. Now, this gentleman wrote an article. He's called Nicholas. He wrote an article that was very interesting. And in that article, he demonstrates that in January, Bill Gates, actually through this organization called CEPI, gave money for Moderna and Oxford University to develop a vaccine against the Ebola virus that is currently ravaging the Congo. Next slide. And he presents this as the patent for the virus. And this patent was actually filed in 2009 and published in 2012. The virus is owned. And now we have, we check that story about Moderna, it is here. Next slide. We also know that WHO amended its international health regulations to give itself more power during the next pandemic, and even came up with amendments to the pandemic agreement that were concluded late last year. Next slide. We also discovered that the Kenyan government has broken all the protocols of managing disease by agreeing to bring Americans who are infected into the country. It is unprecedented. The WHO is not saying anything about it. Our Ministry of Health is not saying anything about it. Next slide. Then on the 29th of last month, our president signed a bill that is called the National Disaster and Risk Management Bill. And it is actually fashioned to give power to the WHO pandemic treaty. Next slide. And now we have an outbreak of Ebola. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. So my recommendations to esteemed guests: adopt the African Union Charter for the Protection of Family and Sovereignty and Religious and Cultural Values and domesticate it. Then modify just one area. There are special groups that are called single parents, families, and child-led families. It needs to be corrected because a family is not complete without the parents. So the special group should be absent spouse families and absent parent families. And then let the charter be the reference document. Next slide. Next slide. So each parliament should check who they are sending to negotiate. The directors for medical services must be held to account. The next slide. And then the legislators learn to look for the deception in those instruments. Next slide. And then check if you have that National Disaster and Risk Management Bill or Act and find out whether it's giving government too much power to overrule the people. And my last slide, the UN must remain advisory. Next, please. And then post-COVID-19 and the current Ebola crisis, both of them qualify for genocide. If the virus is owned and it is killing people, that is genocide and racketeering to steal from public coffers. They are both crimes against humanity. Africa must call out the Ebola crisis before it kills us and ask for a ban. We need to ban gain of function research, and this crisis needs to be investigated and some people brought to book. Next slide. This is where I want to end. This is a quote by St. Augustine. He who denies the existence of God has some reason for wishing that God does not exist. Thank you very much.
Si nous pouvons encore une fois applaudir. Merci beaucoup, docteur